Episode 2 with Reba Riley, author of Post-Traumatic Church Syndrome. Hey everybody, you're listening to the Never Forsaken podcast, looking at the lives of the outcasts, the seekers, the never forsakers, those in or out of the local church and passionate about Christ. The show is broadcast weekly, and show notes and more information can be found at neverforsakenpodcast.com. I'm your host, John Robinson. Let's get into the show. Hi folks, thanks for joining me here today. We are here with author Reba Riley, author of the book Post-Traumatic Church Syndrome, a memoir of humor and healing. Reba, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here today.
Glad to be here.
All right, thanks. Reba, I was introduced to your writings and to your book actually from an atheist friend, believe it or not, who, when I was discussing some of my spiritual journey and frustrations, he sent me this article one day. One was from CNN and one was a Time article, and you had written both of them. And it talked about post-traumatic church syndrome. Nothing that's clinical, but it was kind of an interesting term that resonated with me. What exactly is post-traumatic church syndrome?
So post-traumatic church syndrome, in addition to being the title of my book, in a much more broad sense, is a condition of spiritual injury that occurs as a result of religion, faith, or the losing or leaving or breaking thereof. And it is the term that I came up with to describe my own spiritual injuries and the trauma that I went through after I walked away from my faith in my early 20s. And, ever since I started using this term, I found out that it resonated with so many people, and it was a slightly humorous way to communicate something that I think up until having this term was really hard to communicate. And so it's a definition, it's a frame for a common set of experiences that many of us have had of spiritual injury where, basically church has gotten in the way of God. And it's a way to begin talking about this. It can be a bridge between people because when we can talk about it, then we can help each other.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and resonates with me so well. You read a lot of the statistics now about so many people leaving churches, or they're bouncing around here and there. They're kind of losing their identity in God. I've read it that they call them the nuns sometime, and I've kind of been in that situation myself. You really feel alone. You feel like you're not connected to anyone. But now, actually, in the short amount of time since I've connected with you, read this book, I'm meeting tons of people that this resonates with. Did you feel the same way? Did you feel that you were like the only one going through this?
I didn't even know where to look. I didn't even know where to look. I didn't know that anything... I didn't know that there was a middle path. I didn't know that people like Brian McLaren existed, who's a great progressive Christian thinker. I didn't know that was even a movement. I didn't know it was an option. And yes, I felt so very alone because, a lot of the people that I had gone to school with, Christian school or church with, were either in the ministry actively or, still really adhering to that lifestyle, or had gone in the complete opposite direction and were, on drugs and partying and all that. And while I did a small amount of that myself, by the time I was in my mid-20s, that wasn't my life. And so I literally didn't have anywhere to turn, anyone to talk to about what was really going on and work through the issues. And so what I did instead, which I think is what many people do with their traumas, is I decided I was just going to shut it off. I decided that trying to have a relationship with God of any kind was too painful. Trying to, work through my church issues was too painful, and it wasn't worth it. And so I was just going to choose none.
Well, it's almost like nobody understands. And like you said, you didn't even know there was this middle path. But to kind of start to go down that line of thinking is like in the book of Revelation when, Jesus says, you're either hot or cold, and if you're lukewarm, I'll spew you from my mouth. And that's how I started to feel as well. And like you mentioned in one of your articles, you start to have it's death by 1,000 funerals. I just didn't know where to turn to anymore. And then when I got this article, read the book, it was pretty amazing to see other people going through this journey as well.
I am so thankful. If my book can do one thing, if it can make people know that they're not alone, and that healing is possible, even when you're very, very broken, that is my heart. That is my greatest wish is that I wrote this for the person who is where I was, or who is seeking and doesn't know where to turn. And so thank you for sharing that with me, because it's very meaningful for me to hear that.
Oh, not a problem. And that's kind of the focus of the podcast, is that I'm trying to reach out to people who may be feeling that way, the outcasts, the cynics, the never forsakens. And it's hard to sometimes live in this world and be around Christianity, but still not really feel that you're a part of it. So you go through all of these experiences, and then at some point, how do you decide to, or how did you come about this project, the 30 by 30 project, and writing the book?
Well, as I may have mentioned, in my early 20s is when I walked away from my faith. And it was around that time that I started getting sick. And I started having these mysterious, seemingly unrelated symptoms, severe fatigue, a lot of pain, some stomach issues, but my main symptoms were almost seemed allergy related. So I had chronic hives, and I had muscle spasms, and it just was this litany of things. And over my 20s, it kept getting worse. And this is while I'm going to all these doctors and specialists and chiropractors and healers and psychics and anybody who, had any hope of helping me heal. I tried it. All the diets, all the magic pills, all the whatever, until I'm 29 and my body is literally failing me on a daily basis. And I'm unable to even keep up with daily life. And the only reason I was able to continue a job is because I was able to work from home. And so I learned how to work around it. But I was spending the vast majority of my life in bed at 29 years old. And so it forced me, this illness, it forced me to a crisis point. I know illness does that for many people. And for me, it forced me to recognize that as sick as I was in my body, I was even sicker in my spirit, because I was so angry and I was so bitter against church, against God. And it was really a matter of taking back power in my life. I felt like I had lost power over my body. And so I thought, if I can attack this spiritual injury, if I can finally figure out a way that I can heal that, that's how I can take back some power in my life. I can at least be healthy spiritually. And, I'd like to take credit for the idea of visiting 30 religions before I turned 30. But as I say in the book, I really can't, because it was one of those ideas that almost felt, came to me like fully formed. And I didn't like it. I didn't like the idea. It fit me about as well as a prison jumpsuit. Like somebody who can't go to church, go to 30 churches while you're sick. Right. It was a wacky idea. And at the outset,
it's like sending a PTSD soldier back into combat to try to learn how to deal with it. Very much like exposure type of therapy. I didn't think about it like that, but basically it was, okay, so post-traumatic church syndrome for me was this really big problem, this very intangible problem. And the idea of having like a journey, like I'm going to do this, I'm going to show up and I'm going to do these things. That's a way that I was able to wrap my hands around this really intangible problem and put some tangible steps to fixing it. And again, I didn't have any idea whether it was going to work. Kind of like when you set off to travel, you're like, I know I'm going to come back different, but I don't know how, right.
But it was with this hope that I thought, well, if there is this God out there, I'm showing up and I'm saying like, here I am, come meet me. And I'm doing it the only way I knew how, which was to do this ridiculous, wacky journey through these religions.
Well, and that's the crazy thing about it, is it's not like you went to 30 denominations of Christianity.
No.
So you went to Indian, Native American ceremonies. You went to Hinduism, Buddhism, Scientology. People must have thought you were nuts, Reba.
I think they definitely thought I was nuts. I thought I was a little nuts too, so I was right there with them. and it became, at first I was just showing up barely. And then you see my evolution through the book, how much I begin to change, like this journey begins to change me. And so the story, while it has a ton of humor, because as you can imagine, I'm this white evangelical girl showing up to all these places. Half the time I don't know which way is up. And so there's all this humor because of me at my own expense. But at the same time, what you're seeing is that at every place I'm going, there's some type of lesson that I'm taking that's changing me. Yep. And so, what this story is, it's my story, but I feel like it's the story of everybody who's ever had to seek and everybody who's been broken and has tried to heal. And it's a story about transformation is the bottom line.
Right. And there's like a theme of faith that runs through it. And so you found there was even, I would say, people of faith. You met people of faith in all these different religions, correct?
Yeah. I mean, what was amazing to me is that everywhere I went, I was encountering very real faith. And, growing up, I was taught that these faiths, they were wrong, and I ran into that a lot within myself. Like, for example, when I showed up at the Hindu temple and I'm thinking, I can't get out of my head that I might accidentally be worshiping a demon, right. Like that's what I grew up with. And what I began to understand is that God is so much bigger than any concept that we can put around God. There's just so much bigger. And so what I saw at the Hindu temple and at the Buddhist and all these different places is that people, what they were doing was all the same. They were trying to put a face on God, because when you have a face on God, then you can relate to God. And so I guess once I recognized that God is so much bigger than all of those things, it made me able to be at rest with the different faiths, and to really go in and almost use their rituals with them to connect to something bigger. Because they're obviously, they wouldn't be living religions if they didn't touch something internally, and if they didn't help people connect to something bigger than themselves.
There's that part of us that's always seeking, and but some people would maybe perhaps criticize you and say, well, in these religions they don't know Jesus, and Jesus is the way, the truth, the life. How did you kind of come to terms with that aspect?
Slowly and carefully. And yes, of course, anytime you're talking about religion, you just have to know that criticism is going to come. On the last page of the book, Post-Traumatic Church Syndrome, it ended 3.5 years ago. Mm-hmm. So in 3.5 years, I have, continued to grow. And on the last page, I don't think I could have claimed the word Christian because it still meant something different to me than it means today. And I now am able to proudly use the word Christian, meaning that I follow the ways and teachings of Jesus, follow the way of Jesus. And the way of Jesus was loving God and loving others.
Oh, do you mean it's actually that simple?
That's what Jesus said.
Unbelievable.
That's what Jesus said. So, if I figure those things out, I will go ahead and go back to everything else. But as I've studied Jesus within the context of this framework, what I see is that Jesus didn't ever emphasize the differences. Jesus never brought them up. Jesus met people where they were. And Jesus honored faith wherever he found it, even if it wasn't the right way. If you think about the Samaritan woman, Jesus didn't ever go about things the right way. So I don't really worry that much about whether people are criticizing me or whether, they think I'm deserving of being called a Christian, because I've made that peace with myself and with God.
And you're able to find truth in a lot of different situations, which I think a lot of people can't do. It's like when you were talking with Jehovah's Witnesses, and she was telling you, well, when you find truth, let people know you found it here. And I mean, I've heard that so many different
everywhere, right?
Everywhere you go, and
yeah.
And in my own journey through evangelicalism and some different denominations ended with me in the Catholic Church, and they call it home, and they'll say, well, once you're home, you finally come home, and all these terms that they use. So I felt really good until it fell apart for me. Right. And then I'm like, I'm homeless again.
And it's that's something that I think is really dangerous that we all have to guard against, including me, which is to say, if you go on an earnest journey, you're going to somehow end up exactly where I ended up. I don't expect people to go on this journey with me or go on their own journey and end up exactly where I am. What I hope and pray is that my journey becomes sort of like a permission slip that you can go on your own journey and you can end up where it is that you're supposed to end up at this time. And of course, we always keep walking. This is the journey of life. But I think it really is very dangerous to assume that if someone earnestly seeks, they will actually find the same thing that you did. And this is something I found everywhere I went, from the Jehovah's Witness to the to the Mormons, to the different sects of Christianity, to the Amish. Everybody said some variation of that to me. It's so nice that you're seeking, honey. It's so nice. But, once you're done, come back here.
So what, out of all those experiences and out of the 30 religions that you visited, what would you say was probably your best experience? Doesn't have to be that it was so much positive, but I would say, what was your best learning experience of those 30?
I think it's less about the experiences and it's more about the people that I met and the person who affected my journey the most. His name in the book is the Urban Monk. And he was my teacher for many months. Not just, he was Eastern Orthodox, and he also had studied Buddhism. And so he considered himself very, interfaith, I guess, is how you would say it to be easily understood. And so, I guess the two main influences for him were Christianity and Buddhism. But the way that he taught me was that, meditation is meditation.
Right.
Regardless of where you're meditating or what you're meditating on, it's the same act. And so he kind of taught me to not get all tangled up in like, is this, is this, that, and to just really, really connect. And so, my experiences with him those are the ones that formed my faith the most throughout it. Visits that stand out just because of their either hilarity or, drama would be, my first visit to something foreign, which was the Hindu temple. I had no idea what I was doing. And I show up like dressed to the nines. Like I had gone to the sari store. They dressed me up completely. And I show up and people are in jeans.
The picture's on the CNN article, I believe. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, and so thankfully, people were dressed up later, but it was just, sort of things like that. In Yom Kippur, I showed up at what I thought was the right time, which was actually about 4 hours early. I didn't have a ticket because I didn't know you needed one, and I had to sneak in on the arm of this guy I pretended was my grandpa.
That's great.
I did a Scientology audit, which was just exceptionally different from anything else I did. I spent an entire day with the Amish, including their service, which I was the only English person, as they would say, to have ever gone. I danced around fires with some pagans in the woods, and I mean, if you can name it, I tried to do it. so there's so many, stories within that.
And I think that's important, what you just said, that it's not always about the experiences, it's about the people. And Jesus came for people. And that's kind of what I took from the whole thing. It's like, I always wanted to think like, I got to have this experience or I have to have this certain level of truth, but it's really not about that. It's really about the people that I meet, whatever denomination, whoever I come into contact with. I think that's a great journey that you went through. And you also, if you just would touch a little bit on, you went through a 30-day fast, which when I got to that point of the book, I kind of have the same attitude. I've never done 30 days, and I would say that isn't going to happen. How did you find that whole experience with the fast?
It was terrible, and it was the best thing I've ever done. Kind of like, I think I feel the same way about everything that's really has been important in my life, which doing the 30 by 30 journey, writing this book, doing that fast, all were like kind of terrible while going through them,
Right.
And it's only really in retrospect that you can kind of see, what it was doing, the work that it was doing. First of all, I do not recommend a 30-day fast to anyone. I'm not a medical professional. I was desperate. I was so sick that I thought I'll try anything, and a lot of people do fasting when they're desperately ill. And so for me, it was kind of like a kill two birds with one stone. I thought, okay, I can see if this will make my body better. And it's a spiritual practice. So never will anyone be able to say to me, you didn't give your all. No one will ever be able to say, like, you weren't serious in this journey. Not that I did it for that reason, but I think even in my own mind, it was like, if I do this, I will always know that I showed up. Like, I showed up and I said, God, if you're here, here I am, meet me. And so the fast was really the turning point, as you know from reading the book, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but it was the fast that really began to just do this very deep work. And I think plenty of other things could have worked, but at the time, it was the right tool for me.
And things are different now. So 3.5 years later, and how is your spiritual life or spirituality now? How do you feel?
Free.
That's awesome.
I feel free.
That's a great feeling.
Yeah, free. Even when, like you mentioned, even when I'm being criticized, even when I'm being attacked, like, I'm not going to say it doesn't bother me, because of course, you don't want to knowingly try to offend people, but it's like, I'm just kind of past that. I'm just like, I have this faith that I'm like directly connected to the Godiverse.
I love that term.
I'm not worried really about what anything else and anyone else is saying. And I seek truth. I continue to seek truth and light wherever they can be found. And for me, that means that while I claim Christianity, I also have a lot of teachers who are not Christians. Mm-hmm. For example, a Zen Buddhist monk and a Mormon feminist, and the list goes on. So what I guess I would encourage people to do, especially if Christianity feels confining or it's not working, is look for love in your life. And wherever you find love, that is God. That's the picture of God. And move towards that love. And whatever is bringing you light and life, move towards that. And I truly believe that when you do that, or even if you don't do that, God will meet you where you are, where you aren't. I think all you have to do is open up.
I think that's some great wisdom, Reba. That's great. What's next for you? Are you working on any other projects now?
Well, right now I'm working on launching this book, which is a big job, and I am contemplating a couple more projects. I will write another book. I don't know when. I need to recover from this one first. But yeah, I will write more. It is my passion and my calling.
How can people connect with you, and what's the best way for people to get your book?
The book is available anywhere that books are sold. If you're outside the United States, you will still be able to find it. Also, you can always get it from iTunes or Audible in audiobook version, or it is available as an ebook. So really, there's no barrier to getting the book. Currently in hardcover, Audible, Kindle, etc. And then they can connect with me on Facebook at Reba Riley Author. They can connect with me at rebariley.com or on Twitter at Reba Riley.
I had it on Kindle on my phone, and the app's pretty cool because it tells you how many minutes you have left for every chapter.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Well, I guess I don't know if it's just a generic speed of reading or if it starts to know how fast you read, but it'd be like 4 minutes left, and I'd be reading. Okay, I got 6 minutes for the next chapter.
Oh, that's so funny.
And I read the whole book in about a day and a half, maybe almost 2 days. So the Kindle version's pretty cool too. I like that. Well, Reba, I thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. and sharing with the listeners. I think you've got a great story, and I hope that people can connect with the book and that can get something from it through your book, through your articles, and just, by following your journey through life. I just can't thank you enough for coming on the show and for doing this.
Well, thank you. And, I love the name of your show, and I would encourage everybody out there, you really aren't ever forsaken. You're never forsaken. Even when you feel like you are, God is bigger than that.
Amen. All right. Thank you so much, Reba. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thanks.
Have a good day.
Bye.